So what's new? Part two, new perspectives. New types of cataloguing projects, such as by groups such as the Modigliani Initiative, Factum Foundation, Factum Arte, the Wildenstein Plattner Institute, and Van Gogh Worldwide, are continuing to proliferate in recent years, and they offer alternative frameworks, fresh perspectives, and new solutions that go beyond traditional catalogue raisonné formal perspectives. They're backed by diverse methodologies and approaches, but they all share a common goal in making historical information available to museums, scholars, and the general public. What can we learn from these varied and new ways of cataloguing art? What are the benefits and the challenges also from the legal and art market perspectives? To discuss these fresh perspectives and initiatives, the panelists will be Benno Tempel, Leslie, Julia May of the Modigliani Initiative, Adam Lowe of Factum, and apologies, Elizabeth and Huffa from the Wildenstein Platt Institute, and they'll be moderated by our ICRA chair, Sharon.
I guess the first thing we wanted to do is for each of you to introduce yourselves and tell us a little about your projects. So why don't we just go in the order of the speakers and begin with Elizabeth Gorayeb and Huffa Frobes-Cross from the Wildenstein Plattner Institute.
Okay, thanks very much, Sharon. Could everybody hear me? Just want to make sure. Okay, Huffa and I are here to talk about a methodology called the digital corpus. The Wildenstein Plattner Institute is known for producing digital catalogues raisonné, and we realized that we had a mission, which is to make art historical information accessible to the public, that was almost in counter to the traditional methodology of catalogues raisonné, which is having a very labor-intensive, multi-decade project that's kept under wraps and then debuted with a grand display. So what we decided to do is to come up with a methodology called the digital corpus, and Huffa is going to go into a little bit more detail about it. But what this digital corpus actually does, and before I begin, I'll just to tell you what I'm referring to with regard to a digital corpus. A corpus, for the sake of this argument, is the works that, or a subset of works that are attributed to a particular artist, the corpus, the body of work. Our digital corpus, or digital corpi, are dependent upon a foundational basis. So that foundation can be an artist's existing archive. It can be a previously published catalogue raisonné that we are now updating. It can also be a subset of works that a committee or scholarly group has, for the most part, agreed on, and that we're going to continue to research and verify. And as you'll see, as Huffa is going to describe, this methodology allows us to update the catalogue raisonné project. And we're not talking about it as a finite catalogue raisonné in terms of a book. We're talking about it as an ongoing project. It enables us to update the project and share information on our research continually and over time. So now I'm going to let Huffa talk a little bit about the Wesselmann digital corpus.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Yeah, and it sounds like you can all hear me. Great. Yeah, so to talk about the Wesselmann digital corpus, as Elizabeth said, the corpus methodology depends on starting from a body of work that we have determined we can draw from for that artist. And then what we do is work to verify the works within that body of work. And so we need a distinction at its basis between works that we know there is a record of, works that are part of this foundational source that we've established the corpus to be, and works that we have researched enough that we can correlate those records with an object and say we have verified that work. And so this foundational idea core to the corpus is a distinction between works that we publish in black and white and works that we publish in color. And the works in black and white show only title and date. They indicate that they are part of a record, and I will go into what that is for Wesselmann. someone. They're part of a record that corresponds to that artist, but that we haven't verified it yet. So we don't give you a lot of information. We give you an indication that we have a record of this artwork's existence in the world somewhere. And then once we have verified the object, once we've done enough research on the work to issue an inclusion for that work and a verification, we publish it in color with full cataloging. And so this allowed us with the Wesselmann digital corpus to publish an enormous amount right off the bat, to share an enormous amount of information right off the bat. And that is because Wesselmann is a particularly interesting and good artist to start exploring a corpus model, because he kept incredibly good records. So we were able, from the launch of the project, to have thousands of artworks published in black and white. That allowed us to share an amount of information about the artist that very rarely would you be able to with a Catalogue Raisonné project at that stage in the project, where we really just started. And then as the research progressed, we were able to publish things in color. So this actually slide just shows you some of those foundational sources that we worked from. Tom Wesselmann himself, along with members of his studio, kept a ledger book that we worked directly from. He also made artist inventory images that sometimes recorded provenance and documented the works. So this became the basis of our initial publication, and then we worked from there. Then, of course, to follow up on something that a lot of people have been talking about today, the advantages of a digital Catalogue Raisonné, or in this case, a digital corpus. Not only does this allow us to share a lot of information very quickly, it also allows us to make it very dynamic in a way that would be difficult to do or impossible to do in certain ways in a physical book. So some of the ways that we can do this is we can link directly, for example, to exhibition catalogs. So you don't just have an exhibition citation, you have the actual catalog that you can consult. We can, of course, link out to other museums and other institutions that own those works. And increasingly, since we also have the Tom Wesselmann papers entirely digitized, we are able to show our sources, basically, for decisions that we make. We're able to, for example, have a line of provenance that then also has the correspondence that we drew from to make that determination about that provenance that's in our archive, that you could link and look at while you were looking at that line of provenance on the page for that artwork. So this gives you a sense of how the first project that we did for the digital corpus works and some of the advantages that it has.
Right. And as we continue with our Catalogue Raisonné projects at the WPI, we're applying variations of this methodology to our various projects. Depending on what project is, the methodology might change slightly. Last year, we debuted Monet Pastels. We did it similarly to the digital corpus by Wesselmann, where we took the Daniel Wildenstein 1991 Catalogue Raisonné of pastels. We put up basically black and whites of what Daniel Wildenstein had verified at the time, and simply black and whites, and we said, refer to that book. Works that we, our committee, in real time, examined, researched, solicited, we have put in color with their full cataloging, and most importantly, we provided date stamp to show you that when we researched it, because as all of the panelists have said all morning long, this work is very temporal. Once it's printed in a book, it's out of date. And what is essential to know is when the research has been done. So if you consulted a Catalogue Raisonné 6 months ago, you need to make sure that you're in your citation are listing when you referred to that Catalogue Raisonné, because in 6 months' time it could change. But we have date stamps as to when information has changed. The other thing that I'm excited to share, although it's not online yet, but it will be online, we are debuting in early February, the Renoir Catalogue Raisonné project, the first tranche of it, which is still lives. Now, this is a little video that I'm hoping is going to start. I don't know if it will. Let's see. Did that start? No, it's not starting. Okay. Let me describe for you what you're going to see or what you would have seen. The Renoir Catalogue Raisonné project, as you know, Renoir was an incredibly prolific artist. Our committee, which predates the WPI, the committee was in place with the Wildenstein Institute. They have seen and studied hundreds, if not thousands at this point, of works that have been submitted to them by Renoir. Talk about boiling the ocean. It is impossible to ever be done. Renoir was super prolific. A lot of times his works were even cut up and created by the art market into individual works. So in order to tackle Renoir, what we've decided to do with the digital corpus model is we've narrowed it down to the subset of still lives. And what we're displaying for you are still lives that only our committee has physically verified in person, and works that are in public collections that the committee has verified by talking to curators and such. Works for which we have archival information, like, you know, Huffa referred to Tom Wesselmann's black and white archive. Certainly we have archival information on Renoir, but a lot of those photographs, Vollard, Bernheim-Jeune, Durand-Ruel, so a lot of those photographs are over 100 years old. So relying simply on a black and white photograph, we don't even want to put it up, because we're also, and this brings up another topic, dealing with a culture surrounding Catalogue Raisonnés, where oftentimes people consulted them, the art market would consult them, see a black and white and say, oh, that's great, fine, go on their merry way. We don't want to do that. We want to encourage all of the stakeholders, particularly for Renoir, because there are so many, to collaborate with us and to come forward. And we will give our verification only when we have actually studied the work in person. So what you would have seen here is the Renoir Catalogue Raisonné project with the digital corpus, linking out to a variety of archival resources we have. And I have to say, something that I was very pleased to hear this morning with Dr. Evans' presentation was the importance of not only archival documents, but also oral histories. A digital Catalogue Raisonné, and all of our digital Catalogue Raisonné projects have oral history projects that we're doing concurrently. We're interviewing Renoir scholars or Renoir descendants. In the case of Wesselmann, I know Huffa could talk a bit more about that. There are Wesselmann stakeholders that have all been interviewed, and all of these bits of information kind of blow out the walls of a traditional Catalogue Raisonné, because we're not only talking about the artist, we're talking about the artist ecosystem. So that's the benefit of doing a digital Catalogue Raisonné, and happy to talk more about it.
Thank you so much. Let's pass on to Leslie Koot and Julia Maid Boddewyn of the Modigliani Initiative.
Okay. So, Modigliani, oh, there we go. His name has been dropped several times today, so I think his work needs little introduction. What is generally not known, however, is that there is no official foundation for the artist. At the time of his death in 1920, his artwork was mostly owned by his dealers, and so his family didn't inherit any substantial artwork that could have formed the basis for a foundation and also protect his legacy against the many forgeries that started to enter the market soon after his death. In the absence of an artist foundation and any reliable inventories, for that matter, 5 different Catalogue Raisonnés were actually published between the years of 1929 and 2012. What they all have in common is that they were single-author publications, no peer review, and also little to no justification in terms of provenance. To date, the Catalogue Raisonné, authored by Ambrogio Cerroni, remains the only accepted reference that leading auction houses and museums rely on, even though it was last updated in 1970 and is widely acknowledged to be incomplete. Now, a lot of disagreement remains about the many works that have been historically attributed to Modigliani, but omitted from Cerroni's catalogue. And to a certain degree, it has stifled in-depth scholarship into his entire body of work, a critical re-examination that's really needed. The last few years have seen important progress through major museum studies involving the technical analysis of his work, including works that are not published in Cerroni. However, there has not been a central body to collect all this new information and at the same time undertake continued research into the artist's life and work. So against this backdrop, Julia and I founded the Modigliani Initiative. It's a non-profit research organization that aims to take a fact-based approach to cataloging the artist's life and work. We maintain a website, you see a screenshot of it here, which aims to provide an independent resource and complementary resource for art professionals and the general public alike. And what's very important is that our guiding principles in all our work are collaboration and transparency, things that have really been missing sorely from Modigliani scholarship. Our core activity is developing a digital database of Modigliani's work, and Julia will speak a little bit more about that. I want to stress, though, we are deliberately not attempting a catalogue raisonné, however, because we believe that a lot of significant information regarding the artist and his work still needs to be uncovered. But more importantly, we believe that decisions regarding authenticity, which a catalogue raisonné author is forced to make, should emerge by consensus among a group of scholars. To that end, we are very grateful for our collaboration with many other Modigliani scholars, several of whom are advisors to our organization. We also maintain a productive exchange of information with museums, and actually we're planning to have the first phase of our online database focus on works owned by museums, including some that were omitted from Ceroni's catalogue. Around that, we intend to form a Modigliani Scholars Forum to evaluate these works in an unbiased and transparent manner. In the meantime, while we bring that database online, we freely share our latest research updates through our regular newsletters and essays that we publish on our website. Again, giving full transparency of our sources and also acknowledging contributions by other scholars.
In many ways, the work that we're doing is not dissimilar to laying the groundwork for a traditional catalogue raisonné. And in fact, our research has been greatly enhanced by the capabilities of Panopticon software. I'm sorry. Which many of you know is designed for collecting and sorting the myriad of details of a work of art. There's a dearth of documentation about the short and seemingly chaotic life of Amadeo Modigliani. Much about the 35-year-old artist has been mythologized, particularly after the suicide of his companion, Jean Hébuterne, shortly after his death in January 1920. Our focus, therefore, has been on collecting verifiable facts as we build our database. When we first started the initiative, we began from scratch, focusing exclusively on paintings. We cast a wide net, and in 3.5 years have combed through hundreds of exhibition and auction catalogs, newspapers, magazines, monographs, and the archival records of galleries and collectors. We decided to include all paintings that appear in publications before 1950, whether they are in Ceroni's catalog or not, because we realized that each offers invaluable clues that help us better understand the artist and his market. Our website has 2 sections, Modigliani Reconsidered and Spotlight, where we regularly post short essays based on our research findings. In the former, we offer novel theories. For example, the 1917 show that took place in Paris at the Galleria Berthier was Modigliani's only lifetime solo exhibition. To date, scholars have not been able to determine exactly which paintings were shown, in large part because the checklist offers only titles and no installation photos have been found. Because the database helps us see patterns, it became apparent that several paintings that were most likely shown based on their unique titles also bear an inscription on the back with the address of Leopold Zaborowski, Modigliani's dealer, and the organizer of the exhibition. This clue allowed us to reconstruct more of the exhibition as we found a handful of other works with the same inscription. Because the artist's unique body of work consists exclusively of portraits, almost exclusively, in Spotlight we feature essays about his models. The biographical details of these individuals are rich sources of fact-based information. We believe that these connections to the artist, identifying the works that were shown and reproduced during his lifetime, and learning more about the members of his circle, are fundamental to establishing the necessary groundwork for understanding the full extent of Modigliani's oeuvre.
Thank you so much. And some unusual ways of getting into the catalogs, not just by the paintings. That's really fascinating. Benno, Tempel.
Well, first of all, I'm very happy that I'm here today. Unfortunately, I missed the morning, but I have to say already the first talk of this day, of this afternoon, made me very happy, fall in love again with my profession, with art history. And as I guess that most of you are working in the art world, I hope that you have the same, that this day has the same effect on you. I'm here to talk about Van Gogh worldwide. So it's, like Arte said, it's not a Catalogue Raisonné, but it's maybe a typical Dutch initiative to share things with a broader public. It's an initiative that started by two public museums, the Van Gogh Museum and the Kröller Museum, and the Dutch Institute, the Netherlands Institute for Art History, RKD, which also had a long history with curators doing research in the work of Van Gogh. And of course, the Van Gogh Museum and the Kröller Museum together hold a very large body of works, paintings and drawings, works on paper by the artist. And it's in that sense, I think, maybe a typical Dutch initiative that we work together. If you look at the public museums in the Netherlands, we don't see each other as opponents, we see each other as one big group. Even in the Netherlands, we speak about the collection, the Netherlands, which means that if we want to, for example, for the Kröller Museum, we want to acquire a new work, we always take into account what's already there by the artist in other Dutch public museums. Doesn't say that we cannot acquire that work, but we take it into account. And I think in that sense, the idea behind Van Gogh worldwide is comparable with that, because for Van Gogh there were already Catalogue Raisonnés in existence. Most of you probably know that. Very early on, in the beginning of the 20th century, there was the Lowe Catalogue Raisonné, which had many editions and was also the starting point for Van Gogh worldwide. So we used, if I'm correct, the 1970 edition of the Lowe, and we published everything, all the data that's in that catalogue on the website. I think what's the idea behind the website is that we share with a much more general public than normally a Catalogue Raisonné will ever reach. And it's visible, I think, when you visit the website. So, for example, you have an overview, you see the world map, and you have an overview where the works can be found. So you can easily, let's say you're going to Washington, you go to the website, you go to the world map, you zoom in to America, you zoom into Washington, and you see, oh, there are a number of works by Van Gogh in that and that museum. So it's very easy to find your way around if you are a Van Gogh addict, and I can tell you there are many Van Gogh addicts in the world. It's very easy for them to find the way through the world to see the beautiful works by the artist. It also helps because the oeuvre of the artist is selected by medium, drawings, paintings, works on paper, prints, but also by location, meaning the location where he worked. So even for people who want to visit these locations, it's wonderful to see, let's say I go to The Hague or I go to Arles, what kind of works did he make there? And I think that the website in that sense can be called more idealism than ambition, because the ambition was already in the existing Catalogue Raisonnés, and we are trying in a very ideal world and an ideal point of view to bring everything together on this website. And that's, of course, also difficult. You can imagine that the museums in Washington have no problem at all making visible on a website that in Washington they have a number of works by Van Gogh, but for a private collector it might be a different story. It's linked data, so partly we are, the owners of the work can update data to the website. What is very interesting, though, I think, is all the extras that we can do with the digital world. So on the website, you do not only see an image of the front, but also of the back. There are images of X-ray, of side light photographs. So there's a lot of information also on conservation part. And especially that part, I think, can be very interesting also for the future. If I may give an example, not on Van Gogh, but on other artists. In the past, we made an exhibition on Monet, and we had one of his garden paintings, and there was some strange things happened in the canvas, and we didn't know what happened. And then we came into contact with our colleagues. The conservation department of the museum came into contact with the colleagues of the MoMA, and they had the same kind of strange surface deterioration of the canvas. And it turned out that in the Second World War, a bomb blew in quite close to the place where Monet was living. The glass in the studio was falling down and hitting a number of garden paintings. So that was via the colleagues of the MoMA, we had an explanation why our painting was in the state that it was. And I think a website like Van Gogh Worldwide in the future can also share all this kind of knowledge. So again, it's not a Catalogue Raisonné, but it's a way to reach a broader audience and to make more info, to share more info with the world, and also, like what was said before, more info from the world can be updated to the website.
Fascinating. And again, another new way to look at it as a greater good, more for the general public as well, not just for specialized scholars. Fantastic. Adam Lowe, moving from these great conservation stories.
If I can start by asking a question, how many people in this room know what Factum Arte or Factum Foundation does? Reasonable. So that determines which way I go in the conversation. So basically, Factum Arte is a workshop in Madrid, for those of you who don't know. It makes works for many of the world's leading artists, so it represents some quite interesting problematics that have come up today. And Factum Foundation was started about 15 years ago to apply many of the technologies that we develop to the preservation and to access to works of art that are historical pieces. So we've done a lot of work in Egypt, a lot of work in Upper Xingu in the Amazon, but with many of the major museums in the world to record the surface of paintings. And I'm sort of here today because we were working together on Moderator Rosso and recording. So Factum's speciality is high resolution, three-dimensional recording. What does that mean? It means it's using technologies, developing technologies, to record many aspects of a work of art. But I want to start with a slight oblique sideline. So I don't normally use Catalogue Raisonnés because I open the book up and this page has lots of useful information, but it's not particularly the information I want. So I look at the missing pictures. This is from Kurt Schwitter's. And the reason I start and have been looking at Kurt Schwitter's Catalogue Raisonnés recently is he's an artist who's had to move a lot because he had to leave Germany in 1937. He went to Norway, then he went to England in 1940, and he died in England in 1948. And Factum's foundation has recently acquired. Can you hear? Sorry, can you hear or not? Is that better? So Factum Foundation has recently acquired the site in the north of England where Schwitter's made his last great Meurs installation. So Schwitter's is a fascinating artist for all the issues that have come up with Catalogue Raisonnés, because he's a installation-based artist. He's working with architectural environments. He's a performer. He's doing music poet. He's a poet. He's doing musical presentations. He does collage. He does paintings. He does drawings. There's a great cacophony of things. And most of his works, big works, the Meurs works, were destroyed. The one in Hanover was bombed by the British. The first one in Oslo was destroyed by a fire. The second one in Oslo was recently moved. It became derelict and was then moved. And the one in the Lake District was moved by Richard Hamilton to the Hatton Gallery. So one of the things that's very important in all the things we do is that originality is a process. So I think it's been underlying an awful lot of what's been said that I've heard today. But works of art constantly change. They change as they age, they change according to the way they're looked after, and they change according to the way they're valued. So what we're interested in doing is actually using technology to reveal the biography of objects. Whoops, sorry, wrong way. So when we record something, so with the Prado, we recorded all of Goya's black paintings about 12 years ago. We recorded the surface, so 3D scanning, at this time up to about 100 microns, up to about 1/10 of a millimeter, so you can follow every brush mark. We recorded the color, we recorded ultraviolet and infrared. The Prado had recorded the X-ray, and we worked with historical images taken by Laurent in the 19th century. So what you have here is, for the first time, a complete record with all the photographic types of documentation used at the same scale. So before that, every lens distorts in different ways, and every photographic documentation has different qualities that make it very difficult to layer together. But here you can run through the entire history of a painting and understand. I mean, Goya's black paintings are fascinating, and what came out of this project is we're now working on an exhibition with the Prado to try to give people access to a detailed biography of each of those paintings. It's a little bit easier to see here, but with the V&A, we recorded all of the Raphael cartoons. And what you normally see in a good color reproduction is the image on the left. What you see if you look at the surface is the image in the middle. And what you see when you look at the object is the image on the right. So this is not just a raking light photo, it's a merging of the surface and the color of the image. Of course, if you dive through like I just showed you with the Goya, you can see all the other levels that are below the surface as well. This really changes. So everyone talks about paintings and things being objects. This is revealing that they really are objects, and I love the idea that you show the back as well. So, I mean, for us, very often there's not a lot of point in recording the back, like with the Raphaels, because they were stuck onto canvas later. If only we could have recorded the backs as well, we would have been able to show a lot more than we could, because there's a narrative evolving out of this that, and I'm not going to do it now because it takes a long time, but the traditional history is these were the cartoons that were made, were produced by Raphael to make the tapestries in the Vatican. I think I can say here, these are not the cartoons that were used by Raphael to make the tapestries in the Vatican, because Raphael valued them so highly, he didn't want them cut up. So he made a derivative set. How do we know that? Well, there's a simple way. These are fully pounced. So they're pricked all over, and you don't prick a cartoon for a tapestry, you prick a cartoon to make a copy. Oh, sorry, wrong way. I'll come at this. So when we're recording, and if we're treating things as objects, we can take, for example, a Goya etching plate. And this is with the new Selene photometric scanner that can record down to about 12 microns. So we can record an object like a photograph. We can record its surface so that you've got data down to, as I said, 12 microns. And if we want, we can generate an image from that three-dimensional data, just like Goya did, but without ever touching the plate. So Goya was rubbing ink into the surface and then wiping it off. But we can use the depth of the mark to reveal the tonal values that it holds. Now, I think I'm going to do my little trick here. This is a video. It may play. It's not going to play. So this is a video that actually takes you on a little navigation across the surface of this print. If any of you want to see it, it's on Factum Foundation's website. It's well worth seeing. It's part of a collaboration we're doing with the Boddewyn Library in Oxford. So I should have mentioned at the beginning, Factum Foundation has a long-running collaboration with the Cini Foundation in Venice, and we have a workshop in Venice, and we have a long-running relationship with the Boddewyn in Oxford, where we've been recording the surface of books, manuscripts, copper plates, seals, all sorts of things. And in the last few years, there have been discovery after discovery, because no one has ever recorded the surface of objects. That's where so much data lies. So when we're talking about the surface of objects, this is a Raphael drawing in the Ashmolean. And if you mix the color and the 3D, it looks like this. So the real significance is what you can see instantly when you have this data, is that Raphael is first drawing with blind embossing. So if you take this image, we've grouped together the pouncing marks that follow the edge of the object, the blind notations that were done by 3 different styluses, and the drawing. And suddenly this object, this drawing by Raphael, could be read in very different ways. So you can see it as evidence of the marks that he was making. So where the technology can start to have a real implication is it's allowed various specialists to start rethinking Raphael's drawings, how he was working, what he was doing, how the drawings pieced together, which drawings used to belong on the same sheets of paper. I mean, these are very major, very fundamental things that should be in every catalogue raisonné. So if there's a great example where digital technology can be used, it's in the catalogue raisonné, because a printed book, as everyone keeps saying, is fixed in time. But in a catalogue raisonné that's digital, you could have layer after layer of data that can be accessible to anyone, anywhere in the world, and can be constantly modified and updated. So just to finish, one of the projects we're working on now is a digital, I wouldn't call it a catalogue raisonné, but a digital archive of all of John Martin's prints. So it's a collection of John Martin's prints, every state of every print, derivatives, copies, fakes, imitators. And it's something we're trying to now build. So I'm very happy to listen to the next talk about digital Benin, because we've had some overlap with some of the things that are going on in Africa, particularly Ferdy Semris-Smith's work in Nigeria. And what we want to do here is to say, can we build a model that actually allows people who want to understand the significance of what John Martin did, not only as an mezzotinter or an etcher, not only as an artist who very often is working, so the paintings aren't necessarily the unique originals, because there's a dialogue going on between what he's doing in the in the printmaking and in the painting that go back and forward. But can we also tell the stories? Why was John Martin so important in the 19th century? You know, why was he the great blockbuster artist at the beginning of the 19th century that 30,000 people would queue down the Strand to go and see one painting? You know, these are fascinating questions that get lost in time. And so the role of what we're trying to do is to really reveal the biography of each object that we deal with and bring it back into the present, and to show how digital technology can be used to transform our understanding of those objects.
Thank you to all. I think it's obvious that they have all chosen and seen an added value to digital work, and all of them don't call it a catalogue raisonné, so there's a question of nomenclature. Why? Or maybe there is a need that you're responding to that is beyond what we think of the traditional catalogue. I wondered if I could just ask each of you the groups of two and then the two single presenters, challenges in your work, maybe some of the single most sort of salient challenges in what you're doing or trying to do, whether it be market buy-in that we had spoken about a little bit, where you're all also working in a multiple authority instead of the single authority on the artist. So how does that mesh with other considerations that have to do with the art ecosystem? Maybe start with Elizabeth and Huffa.
Sure. I think the single most difficult thing for anyone working on a Catalogue Raisonné project is access to the objects. Something that I'm struck by in your presentation is how wonderful, as an art historian, it is to see the surface of the works. It's not something that in a catalog, traditionally for Catalogue Raisonné scholars, we love seeing the condition of works of art. It's not something that we write about because then we wouldn't get access. If a collector had a highly damaged work and knew that we were going to reproduce it as such and show the back and show that it's lined and show that it's been overpainted, they wouldn't let us into their house. So for us, it's really the buy-in of all of the stakeholders involved in the Catalogue Raisonné process, which means not only the owners of the pictures, but the dealers who have information about when a work was sold, or the dealers and art advisors who might be reluctant to introduce you to not necessarily the owner, but give you access to the actual work of art for fear that somehow it's going to be, discussed. Something that we've come across, not so much with Wesselmann, I don't think, but with another Catalogue Raisonné project we're working on, which is Romare Bearden. Bearden was an artist, was an African-American artist who, when he was producing his work, did not have the institutional armature around him. He didn't have a dealer or a studio assistant record keeping for him or keeping tabs on where the works were going and who was buying and selling them. So now we're beholden to a lot of folks who are questioning, what are we going to do with this information and why should we tell you? And I think one of the ways that we have solved that or addressed that maybe Huffa can talk about is the digital corpus model, where we give you a taste. We say, we have a record, and if you want more, because we want to know more, please come to us.
Yeah, and I would actually, that absolutely is true, that our ability to kind of establish ourselves early on as an authority just by putting information that we had out there was very helpful. I would also say there's this flip side that we encountered with Wesselmann, such a different project than Bearden. We had so much information, and we were able to put so much information out there. One of the things that in the early days of the project, you mentioned already, Elizabeth, that we had to work with is like convincing people that because they saw what they thought was their work in black and white on the corpus didn't mean that that work was verified, didn't mean that we had made a decision about the object in their possession. And it took time to kind of establish that distinction and establish the awareness of that distinction, so that sharing information produced its own challenges while solving some of these issues at the same time. At this point, that is much less of an issue. People are not that confused about it. But first couple of years of the project, we get a lot of emails like, I saw my work on your corpus. It's like, well, no, you saw a black and white image of something that you think is your work.
Right.
Until we've seen it. So
That's true, getting the buy-in of all the stakeholders in order to be able to work. Yes, the two of you.
Well, similarly for us at Modigliani, access to works, and I would add to that there is there's an atmosphere of distrust. I would say extra distrust in the legacy of Modigliani. So when we started our work of compiling information, approaching museums, sometimes auction houses for more information, there was a lot of skepticism. Who are you? Who are you working for? Are you doing a Catalogue Raisonné? And similarly, we said, well, I think we have to offer something first to get something back. So while we were building our database, we found that we had information that, for instance, if a work was on offer at Sotheby's or Christie's, in their cataloging, that they were missing information, early exhibition information, early literature. So we would reach out and say, by the way, we have this information. If you're interested, sure. Sometimes there was a question, well, what do you want? We don't want anything. We just want transparency. It would be nice if we could see the backside of this canvas, because maybe we find some additional labels that can help us to identify extra exhibitions. Same thing with museums. When we reached out, what are you going to use this information for? And Julia's very good at this. She, as a bulldog, keeps approaching them saying, actually, this painting in your collection, your earliest exhibition information starts in 1933. We have something from 1925. If you're interested, oh, absolutely. So it is a slow process where you sort of, we always say, we said, you know, we have to build it first and then the people will come. I think it's a line from a movie, you know, Field of Dreams. And it's true, it takes time to, because I think trust, especially in the Modigliani field, is not something that you can demand. It needs to be earned. And it's earned very slowly by being very transparent, sharing information, giving credit to other scholars that help you in your research. So I would say that has been a major challenge. The second challenge is that, in contrast to Wesselmann, Modigliani was a very disorganized artist, didn't keep any inventories. His major dealers, if they kept any inventories, we haven't found them. So that's another challenge, that we really have to dig very deep, you know, digitize sources, go to archives, to actually build a record.
And finding creative ways around the absences, absolutely. Very different from Ari's discussion of the old times when it is because I say it is. Yes. Benno, from a museum perspective, and it's an interesting question for you as well in terms of authentications.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And we're not doing that as a museum. So, and especially in the case of Van Gogh, it's very, very, very difficult. I think the challenges are a lot. They are, of course, often comparable with what the others just told. One of the things with linked data is that you're, of course, depending on the keeper of the works. So let's keep the focus on ourselves. The Kröller Museum does the research into a painting. We find new information. Maybe we have a conservation work done on the work. Do we upload it or not? If we don't do it, and because it's digital, it's outdated quite quickly. So I think challenges are not so difficult to find, but maybe I can, look a little bit more into the opportunities, because we haven't said anything about one point of view. And I think there are journalists in the room, so I can be honest. To be honest, Van Gogh worldwide is also a marketing tool. So we have to be honest about that. The museums also use it to reach out. And there are a lot of opportunities on that side. One of the things I can imagine that would be really, really beautiful. Most of you know that last year it was found out where Van Gogh in Auvers painted his famous painting of the roots. Is that a good word in English? So this wall was discovered. And there was an old photograph of the wall that really proved the point of Wouter, who did the research and found this wall, although it was there all the time, of course. It's very easy for us to connect that to the website, and especially in Auvers. If you have never been there, go there, because you can really step into the footsteps of Van Gogh. It's fantastic. Hotel de Ville is more or less the same. The church is the same as he painted it. The garden and the house of Dominique can still be visited. The auberge can be visited, where he lived, where he died. His room where he died can be visited. So that can all be, maybe in the future, be part of the website. And I think that would be really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, access is obviously a key issue. Fortunately, more recently, when Factum started, we used to have a lot of access problems. So we'd ask museums if we could scan these paintings, if we could record them properly, and they'd very often say no. As museums start to realize the value of digital data for the communication of their collections, we have much less problems with them saying no. I mean, actually, it's probably not a good thing to say here, but the only time we've been refused recently was by the Rijksmuseum, when we offered to record the surface of the Night Watch while the restoration was going on, because it would have made much more sense of the data they had, and they said no. But that's politics, so that wasn't about culture, that was just a political thing. Modigliani, Factum would love to help you scan the surface of Modigliani's, because one of the obvious things that you can start doing with machine learning technologies is to analyze the character of brushstrokes, not in the way that humans analyze them, but in the way that you can pick up pattern recognitions. So you would be able to say, with a high degree of clarity, this is unlikely to be a Modigliani. This may not help your argument of getting access. But you should be able to say, this picture is by this hand. Well, of course, then that gets interesting, because if you're doing an El Greco, it's likely not to be by El Greco's hand, but his may be one of many hands, or a Tintoretto, or other artists. So the idea that the artist in their little studio, in their grotto, painting away, pouring their soul out, is in the brush mark, is probably not true. In some cases it is, but not in so many. And really, the data we're recording now, the technologies we're using, are opening it up. And if the goal is truth, which again is a word I've heard a lot, I suggest a lot of the goals are market, and truth is a bit of an inconvenience. But if truth is important, the technologies that are existing now are leading to a revolution, a renaissance in how we see art history, in regrouping things, in rethinking things, in providing access in ways that people haven't thought before. And to me, this is the most exciting thing that could happen to Catalogue Raisonné. They could really lead to knowledge and truth and understanding and clarity, and being able to identify who did what and who did how much of what. So it's not always just the single hand.
Much more indigenous from what we heard this morning about the many hands. We have a few minutes for questions.
Hello. The question is for the Factum Foundation. I've heard that the copies you do are of a great quality. So let's say if you do a copy for a private client for an important painting, how the experts afterwards can distinguish this copy from the original? I mean, it won't pass the scientific analysis, of course, but at least do you put some kind of mark behind or something on?
Yeah, I mean, you don't know. You just have to look at the back and you can see it's not the painting. So, I mean, actually, it's one of the questions that we get asked so much, because you know, everyone, when they write about Factum, can't resist using the word fake. But Factum is the opposite of fake. We reveal the veracity of something. If you're trying to fake something, you falsify it. And you falsify it knowing the qualities that people are looking for to evaluate it. So I look at Van Meegeren and you think, no one could have thought that was a Vermeer. But everyone thought that was a Vermeer that mattered. I mean, they didn't ask me, but you know, you really can tell so easily just by looking at it. So Factum's copies, and in museum conditions. So we had a great evening the other day with the Gossart painting in the National Gallery that I'd made a copy of that toured around, and actually that was even more complex because I hadn't done the recording. The National Gallery had done it with one of our scanners that they have, and so we had to trust our own technologies. And then we had a session with all the conservators and connoisseurs in the National Gallery looking at the two. And the question kept coming up, but you know, if under museum conditions you can't tell the difference, then what happens? And the answer is what happens is it changes the whole approach to loaning paintings, not to owning paintings. So why risk paintings, because they nearly always get damaged while they're traveling, while they're being lent. Why risk them when you don't have to? And the answer is that there's still this myth that you're looking at the aura of the original, which is not verifiable on any level. So the question is, where does the experiential value lie if you can't tell the difference? And so with Jacob Rothschild, with Jacob Rothschild at Waddesdon Manor, we had the great opportunity of putting a small painting by Boucher in an 18th century frame next to a facsimile of the small painting by Boucher in a facsimile of the 18th century frame, and asking the audience to tell the difference. Well, for me, the most exciting thing was that all the guards complained that this became the bottleneck in the exhibition, because people stood there for 10 or 15 minutes discussing. Well, everyone going to the Louvre, I think now in the Louvre, the average viewing time per painting is 17 seconds. I mean, you can't see anything in 17 seconds. You could hardly even register its composition. But if you can start to analyze it, look at it, discuss it, and what I love about this room is things come alive when they're discussed. So catalogue raisonnés can come alive because we're talking about them and you're sharing that knowledge.
Okay, thank you. Hi there, thank you. That was really interesting. I actually had two questions, but I'm going to skip the first one because we're a bit short on time. But it was actually, none of you mentioned funding as being a problem. And I thought it was really striking how much work all this requires, and they're all non-profit. But anyway, I won't ask that question. I'm going to ask about Web3, because we'll look into the future, and particularly Factum Arte, you know, it's all technology, and a lot of what you've all touched on is transparency and fairness, and like everyone contributing, and that is exactly what sort of Web3 is all about, and obviously authenticity, everything being on blockchain, and how each of you have approached that, if you've got time.
In the Netherlands it's easy. We have different fundings, mostly governmental fundings. So that was also the start of Van Gogh Worldwide. The Dutch Heritage Agency and the Mondrian Fund were important for the foundation of the website, and also the Van Gogh Foundation. So not the Van Gogh Museum, but the Van Gogh Foundation.
Funding, I just say yes, please. And 90% of Factum Foundation's funding is self-generated. So really, we've come up with a model by developing the technologies, both hardware and software, and applying them, that we can help the institutions, and that helps us. But we are entirely self-funded, or we have to seek our own funding.
If it's still your question, the WPI was founded by the Wildenstein family and the Plattner Foundation. We received our funding from both sources. Currently, we're receiving our funding from the Plattner Foundation.
So I think we are probably the least funded initiative on this podium. We have a tremendous asset, though, and that's unbridled passion. And coming back to my first line, you know, first we build it and they will come. So it has been almost entirely self-funded. We've had some wonderful benefactors who, without us asking for it, became aware of our work and said, it's just amazing what you're doing. You know, our family foundation can make a small contribution. Does that help you? And I say, sure, that pays for 2 years of our licensing fee for the software. But we made a very deliberate decision to, again, against the backdrop of the whole Modigliani past, where so much of scholarship, I wouldn't even say scholarship, I would say the Catalogue Raisonné history has been so transactional because of the high values of the work. We made a very deliberate decision to stay away from that and say, we are going to work with a very lean budget, and we let our work speak for ourselves. And I think based on that, we will receive the grants from foundations. Hopefully 2025 is going to be a good year for that. But one way or another, we will keep on going.
I was wondering about long-term, longevity as technology changes. And I ask not out of skepticism, but it's also a concern in Indigenous art circles too. And we're kind of taking a both and approach. So I'm wondering how you're trying to build in longevity for these fast-changing technologies that you're using.
We work, because we're funded by the Hasse Plattner Foundation, they're very closely connected with a great tech initiative. Our technology was developed by a company that is a subsidiary of the Plattner Foundation called Navigating Arts. There's also a nonprofit tech company. And because our funding is derived from this well-endowed foundation, and we are working directly with tech, our tech is continually changing and essentially guaranteed by the foundation and its institutional mission.
I would just say that's the elephant in the room. So digital data is inherently unstable. So it doesn't work like paper or other things. But there is an increasing focus on how to transform, migrate, preserve, and ensure longevity. And it's a very big part of the research that goes on within Factum's foundation. Because especially on things that have been overlooked or haven't been properly recorded or need much more attention, like Indigenous work, that need ongoing monitoring. So one of the great projects that Ferdy and I worked on a few years ago was in the Amazon with the Indigenous communities there, with the sacred cave of Kamakawaka that was vandalized, and we recorded and rebuilt it. So this now has various forms of data. So like many iconoclastic gestures, the destruction actually led to the focus, and it's brought the thing back to life in new ways. And there was a wonderful moment last year, when in October, the complete facsimile of the physical digitally restored sacred cave was returned to the community. And it's the most emotional thing I've done. And I think watching the different ways, both digital, physical, I mean, if you can get the data back into physical form, that helps with its preservation. But it's only one way. But it is a nightmare. And it's something that governments should be taking responsibility for, because they have the same problem in tax records and in everything else.
If I understand your question correctly, it's about the technical maintenance of the data. Is that right? Correct? Yes. So in the case of Van Gogh Worldwide, it's very much about collaboration. And one of the three founding partners is the RKD, the Netherlands Institute for Art History, who made a number of websites on different topics. One of them is Van Gogh Worldwide. And because they manage a number of websites, they keep the technical information and data updated. And I think, so for the moment, I'm not really concerned. The question is much more what will happen in the future when technical takes a very high flight, probably. We can imagine what we cannot imagine yet to happen. And that's a big question I cannot answer now. But I guess in the Netherlands, then we ask for subsidy again, and we find a new way to update things.
I would like our grassroots movement. What would happen in terms of longevity?
Well, first of all, I think being fellow Dutch person, I'm going to ask the Dutch government to declare Modigliani he really had a Dutch mother. But yes, it's very much on our mind to preserve our work for posterity, for future generations. So while I think at this moment we are okay, we are constantly thinking of maybe to build alliances with organizations that have that technology already built in, and where what's very important that databases can connect with each other, speak to each other, which right now we do not have built in. We can put a link, but it's not an automatic an automatic link. So that is on our minds. One of the other things that we have to worry about. But if anybody has good suggestions, we are here.
Do you think there's scope for moving documentation of video art or movable 3D scans of sculpture for digital catalogue raisonnées?
Yes. I can say that just before I flew here, I was at an event for our Bearden Catalogue Raisonné. We have a new component on our cataloging system that allows for the display of video, audio and video. So part of the Bearden Catalogue Raisonné will feature videos of Bearden, interviews with Bearden, Bearden at work, Bearden in a studio. So the short answer, yes.
Yeah, and we can incorporate that into any new project, including Wesselmann, which
Yes.
might eventually need it as well. So, yeah.
Thanks. Those Catalogue Raisonné projects are mostly projects that are based on analogic time, and they are. And when we are discussing about the digitalization, it's made the analog world to digital. But I think that there in Van Gogh project there are features that are using this information and material and create something which is, let's say, digital, more born digital. But in Adam's presentation, I recognized the world that is, somebody can call it the Web 3.0 or something like that, that goes beyond and further of this background. And it means that the digital material, digital world is a basic and material to create new worlds. And I have been educated that this cultural heritage material is benefit for the human kindness, and we have responsibility to share it and so on. But nowadays I have seen that the world doesn't work that way. It means that we are living this post-truth time, and our naivety has been misused. And my question is that, have you thought that how your projects and your material can be misused in this in future? I just refer to the famous anecdote you probably know that was going, Mr. President, I think that your Renoir is a fake. It doesn't matter for me, it's real.
Oh, that's a good question.
I would say one thing about it, which is that I think that authority and truth don't derive from technology, right? So in a sense, even if you shift the technological platform that your Catalogue Raisonné or your corpus exist on, you establish your legitimacy and authority through institutional mechanisms, through scholarship, through building trust and networks. And I don't think actually that those things necessarily fundamentally change because your scholarship exists in a digital platform. You still have to do all of those things. Yeah.
Maybe one thing to add to that, it's not Van Gogh worldwide, but it has to do with Van Gogh, a really tremendous project by the Van Gogh Museum in the 90s and 2000s. The Letter Project, I think most of you will know it. Years and years and years of research with the result of completely publication of the letters in the original language and the English translation, with a lot of notes and explanations, a complete free website where every scholar in the world and everybody in the world that is interested in Van Gogh can read and learn about the artist. So the sharing of knowledge, of course it can be misused. if somebody is very clever and goes through the Catalogue Raisonné that exists and notice that a painting is not there, but it's mentioned in the letter, he can try to fake it. But I think the sharing of the knowledge in that sense, I hope at least that will somehow, how do you say it, challenge the fake news and the fake shot.
I'll let you, but one very quick thing. It's much easier to fake provenance than it is to fake a painting.
I asked an FBI agent this question a few years ago, and then I invited the FBI agent to give a presentation for me because I felt so justified by his answer. He said to me, essentially, there are always going to be criminals out there. There are always going to be people looking to do some sort of malfeasance. But what you're doing in terms of taking charge of a Catalogue Raisonné project is providing the public with a resource and an entity that they can go to ask the question. If you go onto eBay, you're going to see lots of Picassos that are for sale. But if you know enough, you know to go to the Picasso administration to ask them, is that a real Picasso? So there's always going to be fakers. There's always going to be people trying to take all of your information and do bad things with it. But as long as you, as a scholar with a mission, are committed to preserving a legacy, to sharing data with the public, and to maintaining a certain standard, I think you can't be cobbled by the malintents of others.
Well, that's a perfect way to end, because all of these projects are about the greater good of knowledge and deeply involved with gathering and preserving knowledge about art, and invite you to continue the conversation for 15 minutes on a break. Thank you to all you guys.